his thoughts on environments, campus environments. So thank you. Enjoy.
Okay, so let me, by way of introduction, I know they push professionalism a lot, in this program, and so I know when you do presentations, you got to get dressed up. I thought about getting dressed up. So my compromise is I came in what's called retirement formal wear. Otherwise, I'd be here in my pajamas. So anyway, welcome to this little gathering. It's nice to see a lot of faces. I haven't caught any of you folks, not directly, but perhaps indirectly a little bit. These are some ideas that, first of all, how many of you are in first year? Okay. A few second years stumbled out too. How many of you have taken the environments course? Oh, some of you have. So here's the deal, is that some of this will be a wonderful review for some of you, and others it's going to be brand new. So I try and tip in between both groups here and not leave anybody behind, but then keep everybody awake here. And I think you'll find some different applications and ideas here. This is a presentation. If you look up here, Navigating Challenge, Halifax, Nova Scotia. That's 3 days drive from here. I did it. And my good friend BJ, his name is Blaine Jensen. Isn't that a great name? Anyway, Blaine is the Vice President of Student Services at Douglas College, which is out in British Columbia. I've done a lot of work the last 15 years in Canada. I still am doing work in Canada without a job, though. And that's the best part of it. And so some of my colleagues, I've done some work at Douglas College and doing what I call an environmental audit there. I'll look at their spaces and I'll tell you a little bit about one job that I did there and some of the results of it. It's kind of interesting how it happened. But the foundation of all my work is in the book called Educating by Design. And now I spent 6 weeks hunkered in my office 12 hours a day. I wrote another book, and it's called Design for Learning, Creating Colleges and Universities of Consequence. That's the cool buzzword right now, consequence. So wanting to be cool, I wrote it down. We'll see how that goes. It's essentially a further development. So a lot of stuff has come out on campus environments over the last 10, 15 years. And those of you who had to suffer through that chapter on computer-mediated environments might appreciate that I put a little more effort into this one. I came up with a whole lot of new stuff because that was it then. That was it. Oh yeah, I'm doing a presentation here. So, where is it? Does that work? Okay. Now, I'm sure you learned that with doing presentations, everybody's serious about learning outcomes. What did you learn? So here's what I think you'll learn. By the end of this session, there you go, basic components of campus environment design. Even those people who haven't been in that course, this will be a nice preview for you. You'll get that next semester. You might even get the new book. I don't know whether they're going to have it out by then, but we'll see. That you can think, and I encourage you as I'm talking about these ideas, that you think about the spaces that you're familiar with on your campus, most of your undergrad campus, or spaces you have to work with now, either through your frustrations or your excitements about those spaces. And you wonder how they really serve the learning mission of your institutions, post-secondary education in general. And that you can identify at least one space there that supports learning that you think would be much better if I could just redesign it. Most of you did that when you moved into your offices. You haul your boxes full of stuff, and believe me, after living for 37 years in a place, I got lots of boxes of stuff. So if you look at my office, you open the door, I sort of look like a box hoarder, you know. I've, all the people down in the paper where you print out stuff for the computer, they know that when they get empty boxes, they come up, they key in my office, they throw them in there. And so I couldn't open the door this morning when I came back after several weeks gone. But anyway, when we do that, when we move from one space to the next, we often bring our stuff. And the goal is to make this new space feel like us. You know? That's how we move in, so to speak. Or in some cases, to remove every inch of evidence of that person who used to be there. You know? But it's our physical space, it's our amenities that we use to kind of express who we are, to make, you know, create the first sense of this is right, I belong here. So renewal or redesign, that's always on our mind, I think, and it should be. And that you'll learn about at least one additional resource that maybe you didn't know about already that you could look up, dig into a little further to understand about campus environments. All right. Now, I always include one additional one, and this is the one I used out in Halifax, Nova Scotia, because those Canadian provinces out there, they like their lobster, you know. And so I'll make the same offer to you anyway, except I only have half the expectations since I'm the only one presenting it. Well, this all began with two questions. I've spent the last 37 years poking around with two questions, and I bet you know what those are. Those of you who had student development class and so on might recognize this one. Do you? You recognize that one? Okay. Well, I feel hopeful because I talked to some folks that didn't know what that question was, and they've been through the whole thing. This has been my mantra. This is my mantra that I've lived with for 37 years. And I can tell a Bowling Green grad out there in the field, and I've done this many times. You know, if I'm speaking from large audiences, I know that there might be a few Bowling Green grads out there. I'll just say the most important question any of us can ask is, how do, and then they go, students learn, develop, and grow. And I know right away, and everyone else looks around, you know, to see whether they drank the Kool-Aid too. So how do students learn, develop, and grow? That is the most important question that you can ask on a college campus. And I also tell students that you're not always going to get the answer to this. And the answer to this is not always going to win your day. In fact, a lot of days, it will take second best or third best or fourth best or even way down the bottom of the line to questions like, can we afford this? Is this an efficient use of our resources? Does this work? Okay. Those questions, and questions like, well, who wants this done? You know, the classic political question. But this question will never, ever be considered if you don't bring it to the table. So that's point number one, I think, that our field is about asking this question on a college campus. Because we know about this stuff. You've been studying this stuff already, you are right now. You're learning how students learn, develop, and grow. That's the question you need to nag people with. I think if we had this question on our minds in the 1960s as we were building campuses faster than people could move into them, we had this question on the plate then, we never would have built half of the stuff that we build on college campus. And in fact, which we are now tearing down as fast as we can because they don't work. They have nothing to do with this question. Here's the second question then, related to that. You put these two questions together, they form what we call a differential interactionist perspective. Now that's a fancy way of saying different strokes for different. There you go. Different folks, that's right. How can we design educational environments that enhance that process? You have to do differently for different students and so on. So there's no such thing as a perfect environment, but only in relationship to who's experiencing that. And that gets very labor intensive, that gets difficult especially when you have someone saying everyone gets the same here. You know, we have a 300-year history of exposing students to the same treatment and being satisfied with a whole curve of outcomes of success. Some very successful, some not at all successful. But so it's hard to convince people we need to do different things for different people. But it is, in fact, necessary. So those two questions then have really formed my own professional life and my investment in ideas. And there you go. Wrote a book about that with my good friend Jim Banning, who is also probably dressed in informal retirement wear right now. But I don't know, he moved from Colorado to Mexico, New Mexico, and now he's wondering, they want to move back to Colorado? I don't know. We all find different places to go when we retire. So I'm going to Bloomington, Indiana, and have been going there since February. One of these days, I'll finish. So this is the book that I tried to put all these ideas together in, and here's the one that I just wrote this summer. It's currently under review. You know, 3 sort of sneaky people out there in the field are reading my 500 pages of manuscript, and they're deciding, is this good? Does this work? Is this okay? And anything that we need to improve on it, but then it'll go to back to Jossie Bass, and then they'll send me, and then I'll try and read between the lines to figure out who said this, and I'll find out because I know people in this field. And so, based on that, then by December 1, I have to have the finished product in their hands out there, so that they'll have a copy ready for the spring conferences. That's the book business. That's how that works. By the way, nobody gets wealthy doing these kind of books. I'll tell you, over the last 15 years, I've sold enough of the previous book to buy a fairly decent used car over 15 years. So I knew not to quit my day job after I wrote that. All right. So in there, I have a whole ecology of campus design. That's what that book is meant to lay out. That book is written at the 10,000 foot level. It spans over a variety of fields, everything from architecture to sociology and so forth. And so it's meant to connect ideas. That's what I do. That's what my work is. I'm an idea connector. I connect concepts that seem to be disparate. I connect concepts to practices that are often in different directions. So this is how I would describe the work I do as an ecology of campus design. Here they are. These are the pieces in an ecology. The components of the environment, their impacts, and their purposes served. Those 3 things. The components, what are they? Well, the aggregate components. That's the component that's constituted by all the types of people that are together in groups on a campus. You're an aggregate component right now. Okay, I bet you are Myers-Briggs. I know we've let more J's than what we need to over the years, and I know the tide has shifted that way, and I'm a big B, you know, so I tend to drive students nuts. Because I never give them directions, but anyway. It's all straight up here. I just don't do that in the classroom because I know it bugs them. And I know if they get bugged, they'll get, upset enough to start learning on their own. So where was I here? Aggregate. I know about you, your ENFPs probably, or J's probably. You sort of found this field because someone said, you're good at ordering our lives. And so, you can get a job. So aggregate. What happens when you put various types of people together in various arrangements, from homogeneous groupings to heterogeneous groupings? and all the problems associated with that. Their components are organizational. What do you do when you, quote, get organized, to achieve ends, specific purposes? Constructed components, those are what people imagine in their own meaning-making systems about the sense or the feel about a place. Sometimes expresses campus culture or a press of something or other. And then the physical, and that's what we're going to talk about today here. But the aggregate, it's due to the collective inhabitants within a setting. Organizational structures related to purposes and goals. Constructed the collective perceptions of press, climate, and culture. Some of this ringing a bell for some of you? Okay. Or maybe not yet. Maybe you haven't gotten to that part yet. And the physical, the natural synthetic. And then the impacts, all of those pieces, all of those components can have a range of impact on people's behavior, ranging from the very positive to the very negative and in between. When you think about, like the middle point there, select, what higher education does best is it picks smart people. It really does. I mean, when you look at the effects, the outcomes of college and so on, if you pick the ones who score the highest on all the other measures, you'll have better outcomes. That's generally the case. Now, a place like Bowling Green State University at the undergraduate level, we pick people sort of in the mid to lower range, and they experience very significant changes here, the ones who sort of get it, who catch on to things. So it's a value-added institution here. And that's what we hope, is that we release people's potential, we stimulate their growth and development. At the very least, we want to get rid of the stressful and limiting aspects of the environment. And we spend a lot of time doing that. So, impacts and then purposes. Promote inclusion and safety, encourage involvement, although the word I use now is engagement, and to build community. Those are the three purposes. That's what our work is. Okay? So this, and I'm offering kind of the latest version of this, not much change. Community is the ultimate set of conditions where learning is most powerful. Every one of you was part of some community as you were going through your undergrad experience. My guess is probably outside the classroom, or maybe both, inside the classroom as well, occasionally. Well, anyway, community is the goal. We need to build that wherever we can, in a student organization, in a classroom, across a semester, in a residence hall, in a department, an entire campus. This is the goal of our work. We're community builders. Why? Because that's where learning takes place. You know, we often think of learning, and it's sort of it's what Parker Palmer calls a perverse distortion, that anyone learns anything all by themselves. We know that's not true. All of you are a composite of that community you have participated in as you were learning, growing, and developing. And that's where your learning came from. And absent a community, nobody learns a thing here. So community is sort of the paradigm. It's the template of design for what we're doing as educators. Well, you can't get community if you don't satisfy engagement. You have to get people, students, to stand up and take on a role, without which none of this happens if they don't do it. It's a bit of a risk, but you have to invite them to engage in their own learning. Now, engagement doesn't happen unless you satisfy inclusion and safety. This is about making people feel welcome and about helping them understand that who they are will not place them at undue risk in this place. That's about safety. All right. So each of these must be satisfied by the prior condition here. Now, if all you do is welcome people and make them feel safe, learning doesn't happen there. Okay? People just feel happy. They feel satisfied. But then they wonder, why am I here? This is nice, but why am I here? That's because you need to engage them in their learning, to take on a role, to risk. When they do that over time, they experience this thing called community. And you'll know that by the day they leave, someone will say they're missed. That's the ultimate test. You're going to feel that coming out of this program, if you're not already. The day, I can't tell you how many tears I've seen that have washed entire parking lots down following commencement, with students leaving this program after 2 years of understanding that they felt welcome, that they felt safe, that they became engaged, sometimes literally, and don't get any ideas, they don't always work out either. I can go down my Facebook friends, I can tell you which ones work. Some of them I never thought would work, but it did. You became engaged and you experienced this profound sense of community that contributed to your own learning, and you contributed to everyone else. All right, so here's our mission. If you want a mission statement for being an educator, here's what I think it is: to include, secure, engage, and invite students into the learning community called higher education. Or in essence, any one of these communities that you work with, you know, whether it be a student organization, an office, a residence floor, a wing, a whole hall, a department, a class, whatever it is, this is our goal. At least I think. So we can do that by using all the components. If you look at the key down here: aggregate, organizational, constructive, physical. Include and secure, you know, we connect people with homogeneous groupings. There is nothing like walking into a place and saying, ooh, these people just like me. You know, you feel comfortable. Or the opposite of that is walking into a group and saying, I don't recognize anybody here. You know, this is not me. And so homogeneous groupings is a way of creating inclusion and security. Human scale design organizationally, you know, it's the small shop where people are most connected. A relational social climate, and then from a physical view, accessibility is an obvious one. We encourage involvement by, for another example, be thematic groupings using an aggregate. This is why we have theme halls, you know, in learning communities out there where we cluster people by their common interests. That's a thematic grouping. Structural complexity, creating committee after committee after committee after committee is a great way to get people involved, because everybody has something to do, you know, and you get a lot more done. Then a culture of engagement. Some campuses, you just feel it in the air. You go down to Miami of Ohio, and you know, you'll see a group of students sitting around a table, and they'll all pull out their Miami Memos, which is a book, like a date book they can buy at the bookstore first day. And they write all of their organization meetings in it. So it's open on the table. So you just look around and you say, well, where's my memo? I should have brought that too. You know, it's that press to become involved. And then proxemics is another way. If it ain't close, you're not going to see people there. Now, sometimes we can do something about that. Sometimes we can't. But at least it helps us. Proxemics is one reason why people don't become engaged. I did a study once on this campus in my environments class where students took like a blank street map of Bowling Green State University and had students at this end of campus draw the buildings and name them. And they had people on that end of campus do the same. And then we sorted them, you know, mixed them all up and handed them out, and we tried to guess who lived on which end of campus. And you could very clearly tell just by the proxemics. They were familiar with what was near. All right, and finally, build community. Well, anyway, use a lot of these strategies They support inclusion, security, engagement, and community all the way up the line to achieve what we want. So here's the a model that the book presents: environmental assessment and design. That is the strangest look. Does that look right? That doesn't look right to me either. But anyway, weird. So it's like a cube, a three-dimensional cube that you'll learn about if you haven't already, about designing. And so you, and the piece that we're going to focus on here is physical, natural, synthetic. Ernie Boyer, a voice from the past who still speaks quite loudly. And you look at this and you begin to wonder, why are they spending all that money putting flower beds in there? I tell you, that's the money best spent. You only have one chance to make a first impression. One chance. You don't get a second chance to do a first impression. And so you want that to be the best that you can do. But it's very important. Maybe campuses you visited, looking at your undergraduate years, maybe it's rainy, weather was bad, you didn't want to go back. You know, so much of that has to do with our impressions and attachment to an institution. There's a connection here between what a campus says and what it presents, you know, its physical designs. And this is the focus then of what we call the nonverbal messages that all campuses sort of exhibit or give. So let me ask you, I'm going to give you some designs. What does this say to us?
You're a number.
Well, that could be. Yep, you're a number.
Professor talks at students.
Yeah. It says, sit in one of these. Don't look at your neighbor. You can in the back of their head. But look at me. And where do you look? Right there. See, that has the console, all the bells and whistles and buttons on it. And so it says learning happens this way. I talk, you listen, you write down. Don't talk, just write down. Sort of like what we're doing now. What does this say?
Collaborative.
It's a different picture, isn't it?
Communication.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a very different kind of atmosphere, isn't it? What about this? What does this page say? Yeah. These last two photos are from the College of Forestry at University of British Columbia. And these are all oak and pine posts that, and then the fir trees, the Douglas fir trees that they bring in. But there's a case where physical design matches perfectly what these students are about, what they're into. It says, come in, doesn't it? What does that say? It doesn't say, be your own, you know. Whoa. I always think of old Hollywood Squares rerun. What does that say?
Medieval castle with really narrow
So
windows.
maybe what's going on inside there is so important that we got these gun portals all throughout here that you can't get close to us. You know, this happens to be a chemistry building, though. So anyway, what does that say?
It's like a Mario castle.
It can't be this.
Yeah, it's this was sort of like my grandmother's living room, you know, with doilies all over the place. Don't sit down, don't make dirty. Just walk through. You had to take the plastic sheets off before you. Anyway, this was my morning walk. I taught out at University of British Columbia once, and this was my morning walk. I went by there every day to go teach in a class there. All of these photos from British Columbia. Recognize this?
Unfortunately. No, it's,
It's now the administration.
That's right. And it's due to be leveled, I don't know when. But it was built, President's Suite was right up there, McDonald. And if you go up there, it's used as storage room now. A lot of, and occasionally I have meetings up there, but it's all this sort of, what I call male lodge design, you know, hunting lodge design, with dark paneling all over the place. Anyway, the legend has it that he had his office up there because he could see the whole campus and he could see what students were up to. You know? That was back when the students marched. So he wanted to know what they were up to. No good, probably. So these are just examples that kind of remind us about the confluence of purpose and place. And that's an important lesson of all of this. Every space that we have on a campus has a purpose, whether it's explicit or implicit. Every space has a purpose. And so you have to understand, what is that for before you can begin to think about designs here. And this is what Kenny DeMont and Kenny wrote about in their book on campus design. It's essential to how we fulfill our mission in how we design the bricks and mortar. So, is there an ideal campus? You know, that's a good question to ask. We all have a sense about that. Here's one idea. I thought this was one of the better ones. Mark Hopkins was a professor of philosophy at Williams College. And James Garfield, President of the United States then, was a former president of this institution one time. So he said, yep, put him on one end of the log, put a student on the other, and go about it. It'd be nice if we could afford that. I don't think we can afford that. Maybe your ideal campus, here's another view. Maybe your ideal campus might have like an inner court configuration, you know, where people kind of gather, walk around. Maybe you have these on your campus. Maybe that had featured a twin towers of a learning center, a library. You know, here's the arts and here's the sciences. Maybe it had administrative offices that were accessible, that were close by, that were not so intimidating. Maybe it had residential learning communities like this that were human scale, that helped support and build community. Maybe it had gathering space with large atrium kind of effects. You know, this was the basis of most medieval cathedrals. I don't know if any of you have been in those, but it was back when people lived in small spaces. The ceilings were quite low because people were a little shorter then, but they were low. And what was inside? A fire. They were smoke filled most of the time. They were dark. There weren't lights and so on. So they would go off to a space like this, a cathedral kind of space, and they were just amazed at seeing how much distance can be captured by inside of a space. It was such a contrast to their daily life. And so maybe you'd have a common dining experience too. That everyone would get together, you know, gather in one place to eat. Maybe the faculty offices would be close by, small units, again, accessible, sort of welcoming, friendly. Maybe the whole design would be compact like this, human scale, pretty well integrated. And there would be a certain symmetry to the whole thing in its layout. Every space had a purpose and it fit. Well, if you agree with this, you're in agreement with the 9th century mind that created this. And this is called the Plan of St. Gall. This was a fully planned monastic community in the 9th century and named after the Irish monk Gallus. This is an idea here that sort of put the notion of places have purposes called community building. Right? And community is what supports learning That's when the whole thing began to come together here in that kind of design. Monasteries were the places for learning in Western culture. People copied manuscripts, they wrote them down, they taught others. That's where you went to learn something, was in a monastery. And you know what? That became the template for the first great universities of the world. Here at Oxford University, you see the same design here. This is what John Harvard went to Emmanuel College at Cambridge University. The same design, the inner court here. That's what he brought over to the New World as his idea of this is how you build a campus, you know. And you look at Harvard, you see the same kind of configuration. The quadrangle is a classic design that is millennial old. You see this repeated again and again. Here's Trinity College in Connecticut. Could easily have been that 9th century. You look at University of Chicago, no surprise there. Even look at recent iteration. Here's Worcester Polytechnic. Even in their most recent designs, you see the same kind of scale and proportion in basic design. Down at Ohio State University, one of the newest residences here, one of the newer ones, could have been right out of the 9th century. So we know about community and space, and we know about community and learning. And I think that's the ultimate design operative as we think about how should campuses look. Now, if you dig into that a little bit more, you'll see that there are lots of spaces that sort of fulfill this notion of supporting learning. And they're ones that include, secure, engage, and invite students into the learning community. And here are a list of 10 of them, I believe. Yeah, that I've put together in trying to think, how do students learn, develop, and grow? So what is needed to bring that about? And these are the 10 spaces. I'd be happy to share this with you later. You don't have to write any of this stuff down. So we go back to the problem of how do you include and secure students? Well, it's by creating spaces that are welcoming and inclusive. No brainer there. Welcoming spaces create this sense of belonging and security for newcomers, participants, and visitors. And inclusive spaces affirm students' identities and support their expression of self and others. So you think about those. Where did you find those spaces? You think about that on your own campus. Where did you feel welcome? How did you feel welcome? How did that space allow you to identify as a person? The next step is engagement. Well, that has the largest list. We need spaces that are functional, sociopolitical, flexible, aesthetic, reflective, and regenerative. Functional, plain and simple fact, you need a place to do your stuff. Whatever it is you do, whatever functions you fulfill and tasks you pursue, you need space to do that. If you don't have space, you can't do that. Sociopolitical spaces, this is one of my favorite ones. That's what this building is about. Encourage spontaneous encounters and human interactions. Flexible space, that's sort of the buzzword in current design. Spaces that serve multiple purposes allow people to change them for their purposes as they change themselves. Participant imprint, to be able to say, I was there, see, I did that. That's an important awareness that students need to understand. It's what you did when you brought your box of stuff in and you opened up your new office and you put all your stuff on the wall. You physically imprinted that place with your signature on it. In fact, the previous person that was in that office probably left some stuff. That was their signature. And maybe you kept it. Maybe it was part of a long tradition of the campus. But it's part of who they were, their expression. Aesthetic. So aesthetic spaces inspire creative sensibility, uplift the human spirit. They inspire people. reflective spaces, quiet individual imagining and meaning making. You need to also have not just time with people, but also time away from people. It's like, you know who Neil Young is? Do you really? I bet you heard from your grandparents. Maybe your parents. Neil Young was part of Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young. That's right. Neil Young says, it's not that he's known as a recluse. He lives out in California, Northern California. And he said, it's not that I don't like people. I just don't need to see them all the time. And so I think learning entails being engaged with people. That's where the stimulus comes. But we need to process that. And that requires space alone and private. Regenerative. Learning is tough work. Wears me out. Probably wears you out. In fact, October 15th is what all of us used to put a big X on our calendars and said, wait till then. That's when all these students are going to come in and say, I can't do this anymore. And we know that. We know that. And so they always plan a special little event to kind of intervene with that. Anyway, you need time to restore energy and motivation for continuing on. And guess what? You will continue on, and it will get better. Finally, community. Community is all those kinds of spaces up to this point, plus distinctive spaces, unique and memorable impressions. And I can think of every one of your campuses that you're on, or including Bowling Green, that have certain character or spaces within them that people tend to recognize that that's unique to Bowling Green, or other places. And finally, the notion of sustainability is important. Spaces have to be humanly sustainable. I'm not just talking about putting plastic bottles over here and paper over there. I'm talking about the human experience. We rely way too much on what are called overmanned environments or over-personed environments. Too many people for too few significant opportunities. That's the problem of a large campus. Now, the small campus, sometimes the problem is being undermanned. And that's having too many things to do, not enough people to do them. It's like what those of you who are, like the Heidelbergs, the Bluffton, and so on, you wear a lot of hats. That's the nature of small private colleges. Okay, so opportunities now abound, I think, on college campuses for redesign, renewal, renovation, a lot of that stuff going on over the last 10 years. I'm going to share just a couple of examples here. This is at the Nicola Valley Institute of Technology in British Columbia, and it's a school that has quite a large, significant population of First Nations and Aboriginal peoples there from British Columbia. And for those of you who don't know, that's on the West Coast. Go north on the West Coast. That's all the province of British Columbia. Anyway, this design of this new gathering space, I apologize for the quality of the photo, but you can see the gathering space for doing several things that are important to tribal life. Getting together and eating, and also engaging in ceremony. Those were two things that drove the design of this space. And it was built in the round. That was done purposefully with the students who were going to use it in mind. Here's a space I walked into once. It looks sort of like an auto factory, doesn't it? This is a college. And so I went out to do an environmental audit, and I said, I walk into this place, I just want to run through it to get to the next place. I don't want to do anything while I'm there. And they agreed in my report. And so look what they did with it. New design, new spaces, subspaces. You see these sociopolitical spaces, okay? Regenerative spaces. There's a little room over there for little side activities if you want quiet. Here's another version of that. The entrance that we walked into is right there, and you saw the backside. Here's what it looks like now. So it went from this to this. You know, totally changed the culture of that campus. The students think differently about themselves. They gather together. It's a whole new dynamic that's happened just because of physical redesign. Other things fell into place. Okay, so let me just stop there. I sort of laid out some basic ideas. And we can have a discussion, or we can learn bricks and stones. And maybe we'll do both. Having no pithy question myself, what would you like to talk about? We have about 12 minutes here. Yes.
I have a question about when we all move to our new locations in life,
Yeah.
and we notice that the environments in which we are joining are not going to encourage the student impact that we want.
Mhm.
How do we go about navigating that culture and getting change? Because with financial budgets and all the restrictions of being new in those spaces, I just found them to be very difficult when I would give advice based off of like what we learned in environments and in this class.
Okay.
This presentation.
Well, you don't show up in the president's office and say, tear that building down, move that one over there, and go find another one there. This is a long, slow process, and it's a matter of making sure that ideas that are important are heard at the right time. All of your campuses, in fact, I don't know what the next 20, 30 years is going to bring, but my predictions are that, we no longer need physical campuses to get access to information. We don't need them. We do not need a Bowling Green State University physical plant to get information. So we have to ask ourselves, well, how do we benefit from having a physical campus? Which I think we can. And those are what I call the deep residual learning of college, the college experience. And it happens a lot outside of classrooms. But how do you learn to lead? How do you learn to live in community? Where do you learn to follow, to cooperate? Where do you learn to engage across differences and benefit from that? Those are the real deep lessons. You don't remember a tenth of what you learned in a classroom. I guarantee you that if someone took an examination on that. And you're only, a year or 2, 3, 4, 5 out of your undergrad experience or more. And I guarantee you that next semester you won't know a lot of what you knew this semester in these classes. So what lasts from the college experience? I think it's all those kinds of things. So we have to think about, how do we use our physical spaces? What's a compelling reason for people coming and living together? So that's an important insight, I think, that we need. I've done some presentations on sort of the idea that I think we're at a tipping point in American higher education now. And a tipping point is sort of a critical juncture where a few small changes, the whole thing's just going to go out. I would not be surprised that 30 years from now, we would not recognize what we call American higher education from this view. I don't think we will. That happened to us in the 19th century. We went from a recitation of the canon-based learning system in small private houses to this thing called an exploration, research-based institution called the university. We did that in a matter of 40 years. And it's because of a person named Charles Eliot, who was president of Harvard from about 1869 to just the beginning of the 20th century. He came up with this radical idea called an elective system. He said, don't make everybody study the same thing and recite back to us what they heard. So that's foolish. Get them out there and explore the world. create hypotheses about the world, follow the data, and so on. That was radical. And let people study what they're interested in. That was radical. I think we're at a similar point now, where the fact that we've outpriced our product, we don't deliver on the product we say we offer, and we don't need physical campuses anymore. I'm not sure where we're going to land, but it's going to be in a different place. So I would say none of these questions will disappear. I don't care what type of campus you find yourself on or experience you find yourself in. It must include, secure, engage, and invite students into a learning community, whether that be online or proximate community, whatever the case may be. And that the learning outcomes must necessarily change. So be an informed questioner. Ask people, plant ideas. You know, if you have an opportunity, and many of you will, to sit on renovation committees, you know, whether it be for residences or new unions or rec centers, whatever the case may be. If you have an opportunity, go and ask questions. Don't sit and listen to someone else tell you what's going to happen. It's slow. It's a long process. You have to be in for the long haul, not for what can you do next week or next month. Good question, though.
Bricks and stones.
I'm ready for bricks and stuff.
Are you done? You done with theorizing?
I just had it in my own.
Well, okay.
I don't, oh, are we sing? We sing, do we?
Go ahead now. This often happens when I pick up my.
No, I'm a meeting.
I know. All right. So, rumor has it that I write songs, and I do. And this is often how I put things together in my head. Is I'll when you write a song. I don't want to see any of this on YouTube.
Oh,
When you write a song, you have to sort of cut to the chase and grab the concept and run with it. It's called a payoff line. So idea of bricks and stones. That was a good payoff line. And so I'll sit down and I have no idea how I write songs, but I do. And you see this arrow right there? When I nod my head like this, then you'll go to the next one. This is my little travel guitar. And I take on the road. It's about bricks. It's about stones. You can sing. I'll go through it once and we'll come back in. About charm and the color of the corner I call home. It's about ground. It's about place. About the purpose and the feel and the outcome of my space. Now this is known as a bridge. It's about near and it's about far. About, this is my favorite line, about the time and the effort and the distance to my car. With enough time, right design, I will shape and build and make things look like mine. It's about bricks. Ready? Now, see, this is called a come around. And it sounds like this. That's your cue. It's about stones, about charm and the color of the corner I call home. It's about ground, it's about place, about the birds and the field and the outcome of my space. It's about near, it's about far, about time and the effort and the distance to my heart. With enough time and the right design, I will shape and build and make things look like mine. Well, I wandered out to class, go to class, wayfinding on my mind. Followed some with books and maps, but it took way too much time. Stopped to look around and asked. They said, we just can't say. Although an unfamiliar place, I guess I'm here to stay. It's not this. It's about stones. About the charm and the color and the corner I call home. It's about ground. It's about place. About the purpose, the deal, and the outcome of my space. Where is it? It's about here. It's about far. About the time and the effort and the distance to my car. With enough time and the right design, I will shape and build and things look like mine. So I found myself back at the dorm, tired and not too soon. Turned the dial right to the spot. Life's my favorite tune. Came a thumping at my door just like a sonic boom. Turn it down or turn it off before I leave this room. It's about grace. It's about storms. About the charm and the color of the corner I call home. It's about ground. It's about place. About the purpose and the meal and the outcome of my space. It's about here. It's about far. About the time and effort and the distance in my car. With enough time and design, I will shape and build and make things look like mine. Well, you think by now I'd see the way from here to over there. When north and south are in the choice, can't seem to know that where. You can take a turn to the right or left, purpose or a dare. It'll leave you lost without a clue, and wishing someone cared. It's about rivers, it's about storms, about the charm and the color of the border I call home. It's about ground, it's about place, about the purpose and the deal and the outcome of my space. It's about here, it's about far, about the time and the effort and distance to my car. With enough time and right design, I will shape and build and make things look like mine. I had 20 more verses to that song, but anyway. You can, just to give you a, one of these days, we'll have another little session, maybe sometime if you're all interested. But there's the song Vector Heaven. You gotta learn that one.
Do it, I'm going, do it.
You Vector Heaven. There's, I'll teach all these to you, but if you have to go, you go. Just think, anybody recognize this theory? What is it? What theory is this represent?
World.
No! What are they teaching you?
I'm wrong.
There you are.
There we go,
There we go.
Goldberg.
I'm in trouble. Okay. And then there's the work of who did this? Well, I wrote this, but anyway. Who did that work? Please tell me. Okay, her first name is Carol. Who said that? Good job. Good job. Good job. Carol Gilligan wrote about the ethic of care versus the ethic of justice. This is a song about the ethic of care. And then one of my favorite ones. I'll just teach this one. If you gotta go, you gotta go. All right, so. I got style, MBTI style. When you measure my pics and consider my tricks, you will see in a while that I've got style. I've got style. Do that much. I've got style. MBTI style. When you measure my pics and consider my tricks, you will see in a while that I've got style. I've got style. E's get degrees by their charm and their wit, and I's come in pairs but prefer just to sit. S's are tactile and want more detail, and N's give up when their imaginations fail. I got style, MBTI style. When you measure my pics and consider my tricks, you will know why that I got style. Feelers respond when their values are crossed, but thinkers will bolt if the logic is lost. J's come prepared to sort into files, and P's come to search as they scramble through style. You measure my pics and consider my tricks, you will see in a while that I got style. I usually have a group of doo-wop singers back here that join me on this. And the introverts, extroverts, judgers, perceivers, sensors, intuitors, thinkers, and feelers, we all come prepared to support and to serve. Now find a word that rhymes with serve. I did. Whatever your preference, we'll push it with her. I got style, MBTI style. When you measure my pics and consider my tricks, you will see in a while that I got style. Now this is known as a fade-in. I've got style. I've got style. Then go down. I've got style. And the bricks and stones, you learn that one. Oh, learn, develop, and grow. Here's another one. And outcome, Joe. Next year, are there some of you that outcomes course?
Yeah. It's happening.
Income, outcome. Everybody needs one. Everybody wants to say, after 4 long years of a college education, it's graduation day. That's 4 long years of a college education. I think I'm on my way. Well, ethical, decisional, and in between conditional, I know I'm just as good as the next. To do real smart through, you got to be critical before you even open the text. Because what may sound like a great idea might turn out to be a big dud. That lands in the middle of an F plus paper with something sounds like a thud. Oh, income, outcome, everybody needs one. Eventually, after 7 long years. Now, some of you might be studying human aggregates right now. This was the last piece of it. We get together in group. That's what the human aggregate story is. Well, anyway, it's great fun. I like this much better than teaching. So thank you all for coming. I tell you, I don't miss the grading papers. I don't miss. I don't miss any of that, but I miss students. I really do.
You can come teach us
For
songs.
coming and reminding me what?
You can come teach us songs anytime.
Okay.
Will you be in Bloomington in the spring? If not, you just come back for tour too.
I will be. I'll be there. For that. Anyway, there are some of you that are pickers out there that I want to make sure that these are handed on. I mean, that's the folk tradition, is to hand on the songs, you know. So anyway, we'll get her done.